Hi, and welcome to this week's Facebook Live session, where we're going to be concentrating on trusted providers. So for those of you who are kind of unfamiliar or the first time listening to these Facebook Live sessions, just like to say we run them every single week. For the last couple of weeks, the third week now, we've been focusing on the next update, a new functionality that's coming out in version 1.4 update, which is due out on November the 5th. If you can always go if you're an administrator on any TeamKinetic system. If you go to beta.teamkinetic.co.uk/vk/admin, that's our test site, and you can just log in there as you normally would, log in using your normal details, admin login details, and you'll be able to play around with the next version of the system. Obviously, don't put any sensitive information in there because it's a shared system, so everyone has access to it. So just make sure you put in dummy information. But yeah, it's very useful and highly recommended. I highly recommend that you do actually take the time to do this and then get yourself au fait with the new version, because there's quite significant differences in there. If you do spot any issues, then within the beta system, if you go to help and support, down to support tickets, and create a support ticket, and flag it up to us, that's really appreciated. Or if you got any kind of any concerns or any kind of feedback, if you flag it through the support ticket within this beta system, then we'll be able to reply. Won't be able to reply to you, but we'll certainly take it on board. So the background to trusted providers. So basically what we've realized over the last probably 2 or 3 years is that there is a key difference between opportunity providers who are internal to your organization as opposed to ones providers who are external, i.e., they're in other organizations you might be affiliated with, but they're not part of your organization. And there was this need for these internal providers to have elevated privileges, okay, to be able to give them more options, essentially. So that's why we've gone ahead and we've developed this thing called trusted providers, okay, which is basically a form of a form of very low-level administrator. That's how I describe them. So what things can these trusted providers do? Well, there's some things like they can, their opportunities that they create are automatically cleared, so they can go active on the system straight away without being checked by the administrator. You can also, they can also create, or they can create opportunities which require a DBS or references or inductions. Okay, so at the moment, if you've got DBS, references, or inductions switched on in your system, then it means that providers can create obviously opportunities which are restricted by either DBSs, references, or inductions. But that's not always a good thing to do, because as we're probably aware, those 3 things there are usually controlled within your organization. For example, the induction is a generic induction, which is done, it's not about inducting somebody onto an opportunity, it's about the induction they get onto the actual system itself. Same with the references. Well, the references, if you require a reference, it gets approved by the administrator of your system. It doesn't get approved by the provider. And the same with the DBS. The DBSs are between the volunteer and your organization. It's not the volunteer and any organization they want to volunteer at. So it makes sense that DBS references and inductions can be restricted or only made, can be controlled by providers who work for your organization, who are trusted providers. Okay, I imagine there's some people out there who are scratching their head now, and there's other people where the coin's finally dropped on that one. But if you think about it, there's a reason for why we chose those 3 particular things. Now, we've also got given them the ability to create volunteers. So, like you say, they can, if a volunteer sat next to them, they can actually register a volunteer onto the system. And the key big one is trusted providers have the ability to add any volunteer on your system to their opportunity, where normal providers can only add volunteers who have basically been linked to them, or volunteers who've previously been on their opportunities onto an opportunity. So trusted providers can choose any volunteer. So essentially, they have access to the details of any volunteer in your system, which is why it's important that those trusted providers are restricted just to people who work for your organization. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do now is go ahead and show you how to mark someone mark a provider as being trusted. So if I go down to my providers here, First of all, you can see if they're trusted because they have this star, trusted star at the start of their names. Okay. If you want to mark one of them as trusted, so let's just choose one, Bob's Org here. Let's go for that one. From Bob's Org. Look at this provider here. Once I go into the details, I can make trusted by clicking this button here. Okay. Mark them, and I can remove it. I removed it all in one go. Now, if you go down to, if you want to do multiple providers, so when we roll out this, I'm guessing you're going to definitely going to want to check who you've got marked as trusted providers and make sure, obviously, make sure that that you're happy. It's going to be a case of you adding these people on, internal providers, basically adding them on and marking them as being trusted. So in order to do that, rather than going in one at a time, you can mark multiple providers. And down the bottom here, you can say change status and grant trusted status and access. Okay, and update. And if we refresh the page, you're going to see the little stars appearing next to their name. Okay, so that's how we mark someone as being trusted. The next thing you may want to do is, well, let's go and impersonate one of those volunteers. Let's go to CCC provider. So this is a trusted provider here. Let's go and impersonate one of those trusted providers. So if I go along here, click on the three dots, I can go down to impersonate. So I'm now logged in as that trusted provider. So from here, I have create volunteer. That's an option that's available to me now, which basically takes you through to the registration questions. Now, the great thing about this is these trusted providers can add volunteers even if they don't have an email address. So admins can do this at the moment, but now trusted providers can also do it. So if we click on it, you'll see that these two fields here are non-mandatory. They're not marked in red, which means you can add a volunteer without filling in their email address and password. Now, obviously administrators through the training be aware of this, but obviously you have to keep in mind that it's very hard to communicate with those people. They're not going to be able to log in. They're not going to be able to log their hours. You have to have the hours logged for them. And communicating in terms of them receiving emails is obviously impossible because the system doesn't know an email address from. So, but this is flagged up to the providers on the opportunity. So when a provider sees a list of volunteers who have joined their opportunity, it does show whether they've gotten an email address recorded within the system. Okay, so that's creating a volunteer. The next one is adding a volunteer to a session. So if they go to, let's go back to our provider here, and have they got any opportunities set up? One opportunity, that's lucky. So let's go into that opportunity. Now, if I go down to the sessions here, 2 sessions. Now, even though these sessions have passed, I can still add volunteers onto them retrospectively. Now, normally, the provider would only be able to add volunteers who have previously been on their opportunities. Because this is a trusted provider, it'll be able to add the details of any volunteer on the system. Okay, so that's processed. There we go. Now we have a volunteer who's never volunteered for this provider before on the system. Okay, and when they go to create opportunities, they're going to have the ability to restrict to things like, let's look at the restrictions, joining restrictions. So volunteers must have a criminal record check, so they can now see this option, where before, if as long as it's switched on, other providers will not be able to see this option. But if you've got criminal check switched on, then only trusted providers will be able to see this option here. Okay, and that's the same for inductions, and also it's the same for references. Okay, so only they will be able to request that a reference is required in order to join that particular opportunity. So those of you wondering, well, where are these options? The options are to turn on references and DBSs and inductions are all within the super admin options, which are in here. And if you go down to options, and I think it's in opportunities down here, the options are down here, you can change. Okay, so I hope that's useful to you and give a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a taster for what's possible with trusted providers. I'd be really interested to get your feedback on this. If you think there's any kind of other privileges that we should be giving these trusted providers. We've not quite decided on exactly what the approach is in terms of who we're going to mark as trusted providers. in all honesty, we'll probably mark nobody as a trusted provider to start with, and then we'll allow you, once the update's been rolled out, we'll allow you to sit and mark them down, internal providers as being trusted, so they can do these additional things. As always, if you've got any questions, then feel free to either add them to the comments on Facebook, or you can raise a support ticket, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks for your time.